He is today in Garmisch, Germany. At this very moment, he is participating in a reception for about 300 students at the College of Strategic Studies and Defense Economics of the George C. Marshall European Center for Security Studies. He will speak at a graduation ceremony there tomorrow. Later today, as he always does when he visits the Marshall Center, he will meet with General Jowen and with other four-star component commanders who are over there in Germany. Earlier today, Secretary Perry joined his counterparts in the Ukraine and Russia in Pervomaisk for a symbolic planting of sunflowers at the Silo 110 site, which the three defense ministers blew up in January. The Secretary also viewed a now empty nuclear weapons storage site. As we mentioned last week at the breakup of the Soviet Union, Ukraine found itself with 2,500 tactical nuclear weapons and 1,900 strategic nuclear weapons, making it the third most powerful nuclear nation on Earth. Ukraine is now free of all nuclear weapons, which is a dramatic example of preventative defense. Dr. Perry visited a housing area built through non-Luger funds in the town of Pervomaisk for missile officers who are being demobilized. There was also a signing ceremony for this year's allotment of non-Luger assistance, $43 million. That brings the Ukraine's total to about $400 million. Tomorrow, after his speech at the Marshall Center, which is open to media coverage, Dr. Perry flies to Lisbon for meetings with senior officials of the government of Portugal. And with that, I would be happy to try and answer some of your questions.
Anything more on the shoot down?
I don't really have anything more on that. I think most of you know that, excuse me, I think most of you know that late yesterday, Hawaii time, yesterday afternoon, there was an A-6E intruder which was inadvertently shot down by a Japanese destroyer during RIMPAC 96 exercises. I'm happy to be able to report that both the pilot and the bombardier navigator ejected safely and were picked up very soon thereafter, returned to the aircraft carrier Independence from which the A-6 had been operating. Both are in good condition. One is actually returned to duty at this point. The Japanese have apologized, and we certainly accept their apologies. This, I think, could best be characterized as a very unfortunate training accident.
Do you have anything on what seems to be the inexplicable story now that the U.S. plane is coming directly at the ship in daytime, clearly visible, with a wire on it, and the drone way off behind it, a couple miles at least, and the plane is shot down instead of the drone? That seems...
No, I don't think at this point it would be useful for me to speculate on the causes of the accident. As you point out, though, these training exercises, what occurs is that the A-6 tows a target, which is essentially a large sleeve, and the target is normally towed between 4,000 and 5,000 yards behind the aircraft. This is a common practice, and there are procedures that are established to prevent these kinds of occurrences to ensure safety. Obviously, in this particular instance, there was something that did not work in accordance with the procedures. But I think we'll have to wait for the investigation to reveal exactly what that was. Yes.
What are the, do you see any impact this event will have on future U.S.-Japan military cooperation?
I don't see any impact. I think it, as I said before, it was a regrettable accident, and we don't see any impact on our military exercises with the Japanese.
Well, what are the procedures for preventing this sort of thing?
Well, in general, what would normally occur is that there would be a couple of passes by the A6 to establish its presence and to allow for the ship to become to adjust for the target practice that is scheduled. Another thing that would normally occur would be some kind of a check-in procedure once the A6 was overhead the ship. That is to say, once the ship could actually see that it was above the unit that was going to be conducting the target practice. I also want to correct one other thing that I said. That tether, the length of the tether behind which the target is towed is 4,000 to 5,000 feet, not yards.
Mike, were those procedures followed?
Can't tell you at this point. That's something that the investigation will have to reveal. Yes.
Yes, what explanation did the Japanese offer for this?
At this point, I am not aware of any explanation. I know that both the Japanese Self-Defense Force and the 7th Fleet are looking into the matter, and I think we'll just have to wait until we see what the results of their investigation reveal. Yeah.
When you say
that-
when you say that the ship sees the aircraft, it visually from the bridge of the ship, the
Well,
target
the
is
aircraft sees the ship.
the aircraft sees the
Sees
ship.
that it's directly over the ship. But again, I think what you need to do is to wait until the investigation occurs. Yes.
Can you confirm it was a phalanx that shot it down?
Excuse me?
Can you confirm that
Yes.
it was a phalanx that shot it
Phalanx.
down? Is this the normal way that you train on the phalanx system with a towed target as opposed to a drone?
I can't answer that question, what the procedures are in the fleet at this time. I don't know whether there is some norm that is established. You might want to check with the Navy on that. Yeah.
Is there any history of any sort of mechanical problems with the phalanx?
Certainly
causing
nothing
something like
that
this?
would have predicted this.
Has the U.S. ever had an incident like this where
I
The
can't
phalanx
tell.
has malfunctioned
You
in
might
this
want
way?
to check with, again, with the Navy to see if there's anything that would indicate this. But I'm certainly not aware of any kind of weapons system problems that
Also,
would have.
there's some confusion at this point as to whether it was a sleeve that was being towed, which would be at 4,000 or 5,000 feet, or whether it was a tactical decoy, which is a dummy cruise missile, or a silkworm missile, which would trail at about 15,000 feet and would be a solid sort of international orange.
Yeah, I
dummy
can't
dragging.
comment. I simply don't know, but I'm sure that people out in Hawaii would be able to help you mark it.
Has Japan offered to pay for the downed airplane?
I know that the Japanese have extended apologies. I know that there is a telephone conversation that is scheduled to occur between the acting CNO and the head of the Japanese Self-Defense Force later this afternoon. I can't tell you what the contents of the call were.
What
get a readout
what
from
is
that?
the latest price estimate on the cost of an H-6E?
I'm sure you could find that from the Navy, but I don't have it for you.
Will
Yeah.
the investigation be conducted jointly?
Certainly, yes. If you mean a single investigation, I think there are actually two investigations that are going on, but certainly at some point we would want to bring together the material that's gathered in both of those.
How long do you expect that to take?
I can't give you an estimate at this point.
Well, normally, a phalanx operates on automatic. Do you know if this was operating on automatic?
Can't tell you at this point. Certainly, that would be the kind of detail that would come out in the investigation.
Have the Japanese given any indication whether there was human error involved or whether they
No,
blamed?
to my knowledge, they have not.
Has this particular exercise been being performed during RIMPAC 96 before this incident?
I can't answer your question. I can tell you that RIMPAC has been going on, at least to my knowledge, since 1970. It's 15 years at least. So it's been going on for a long time. The Japanese have been participating in it. We do this, the kinds of exercises that we're talking about here, certainly within the United States Navy frequently, but I think they could offer you further guidance on whether we've done this before with the Japanese. Yes.
Has there ever been?
Just a second. Yes.
Do you have any details about how the pilots were able to safely escape?
Don't, but I'm sure that you could get that from the folks in the Pacific.
Well,
Yes.
in all the years then that this has been going on, has there ever been an incident like this?
To my knowledge, no.
Can you take the question?
What? The question was, that there's ever been an
Yeah.
incident?
You double check?
As far as I know, but I think the best place to check is in Hawaii, where they run this exercise every year. They've got a full operation set up to answer your questions 24 hours a day.
Where was
Yeah.
the plane hit and how many rounds hit
Can't
the plane?
tell you. I just don't happen to know. As I understand it, the aircraft was disabled to the point that the pilots felt they had to eject and did so.
Do you know whether the
Related
plane was still
question
on
to
a,
that.
do you know whether
Excuse
the
me?
plane was still on approach to the ship or whether it had passed by?
Can't tell you. Don't know the position of the aircraft.
Dave earlier was saying inadvertent damage, but this is not a case, this can't be a case where something else happened and the plane was hit. The plane was shot down, was simply shot down, right?
Well, I'm not sure that that's the correct characterization. The aircraft was hit by the fire to the point that the pilots and the bombardier navigator felt that it was no longer operable. They were able to eject safely. I don't know that you would say that it was shot down. Keep in mind that when you're doing this kind of an operation, the aircraft is flying at a fairly low altitude, and there may have been some requirement for them to maneuver so that they could actually eject.
What was the altitude?
I can't tell you, but normally it's fairly low. Keep in mind that the range of the Sea Whiz is only 1.5 kilometers.
Another
Yeah.
topic?
No.
Yeah.
The SINCPAC folks this morning said that the tether was 2 to 3 miles long. You're saying now 4,000 feet?
Okay. You go with what they have said. I can tell you what it normally is, but they certainly have the detail out there. Yes.
When you do this practice exercises among the Americans, do you coordinate between the aircraft and the vessel?
Always.
When they,
Always. Positive control.
Is it,
Absolutely.
has it been done on this exercise with between the Japanese vessel and
I think you're going to have to ask the question out there, but I can't conceive of a time when you would do an exercise where you would not have communications between a target unit and a ship that was going to do firing. Okay, anything else on that one? Yeah.
There's two articles today in the early bird regarding the Brown crash. One article says implies that General Stevens, William Stevens, being relieved of duty, was made a scapegoat, and the other two Air Force officers are being made scapegoats. In the article in USA Today, that was in the Washington Times, in USA Today, Steve writes that that a partner and friend of Ron Brown's, Nolanda Hill, said that Ron Brown insisted on flying despite bad weather, and that she begged him not to fly. This is in contrast to what the Secretary said about this matter. What can you tell us?
I think that the best that I can tell you at this point is that we hope to have the accident investigation completed soon. We will do a full press briefing, and at that point we may be able to answer some of these questions, but I have nothing to offer for you on that one.
How soon?
I believe that we may be able to do something for you this week, and we'll be in touch on an official basis later on when it becomes clear that we will indeed be able to do that. Yeah, Mark.
On Bosnia, can you address this changing mission or not? What's changed?
Well, Mark, I think if you recall General Jowen's last visit here, which was about 3 weeks ago, he talked about some of the accomplishments that I-4 has had in the first 120 days, and how he expected to proceed as we move toward 270. He indicated at the time that what we have been able to do in the first 120 days was to essentially accomplish a lot of the military tasks. During that period of time, the military had focused a lot of its attention on the zone of separation, on moving heavy weapons and moving military personnel into these cantonment areas. And he indicated that as we accomplish those tasks, it would open up opportunities for I-4 to expand and to continue the mission, which would essentially promote the freedom of movement, which he felt was going to be so important to the whole election process and toward creating the kind of stable environment that would be necessary in order to create a country that had some opportunity to last. I think what you heard over the weekend from Secretary Christopher, having talked to both General Jowan and Admiral Smith, was that we have accomplished a lot of those tasks, that we have been able to increase the I-4 patrols, that I-4 is becoming a more visible presence throughout much of Bosnia where it was not so visible before. And the result of that is that the war criminals who have from time to time been very visible will not be able to be as visible in the future. It will also have the opportunity to increase potential for contact with indicted war criminals. Now, from the very outset, General Jowan has made it clear that although the pursuit of war criminals is not an I-4 mission, detaining any indicted war criminals which I-4 troops come across is certainly well within the mission. And he anticipates that may occur in the future. And that is what Secretary Christopher was talking about. Now, when did these missions actually start increasing? I think you've seen that over the last few weeks. It's not something that I think you saw start on Sunday, but I think you saw on Sunday because of the meetings that General Jowan had with Secretary Christopher and with others there in Geneva, that there was certainly a renewed emphasis, renewed attention to the fact that I-4 can play a very positive role in this important aspect of making sure that that the elections are able to proceed in accordance with the schedule.
So I-4 will not be in any kind of commando pursuit a la Mogadishu?
I do not anticipate that sort of thing, nor did Secretary Christopher. If you look at the transcript from Secretary Christopher's press conference, he indicated this was not a change in mission. Indeed, it is not a change in mission. What it is the progression, the continuation of the I-4 mission that has been established from the very outset. I think that you also, it's important to recall that the factions are, in accordance with the Dayton Accord, the entities that are responsible for apprehending indicted war criminals. What I-4 has said all along is that certainly as they encounter indicted war criminals, they will detain them and turn them over to proper authorities. And the proper authorities are the International War Crimes Tribunal, which is the organization that will determine guilt or innocence in the case of those indicted war criminals. Yeah.
Another question on the shoot down from one of your answers. Do you have any information on whether the Japanese ship opened full fire on the plane, just as it would have on the drone, or if only one gun went off?
I can't tell you that. I think it might be helpful, because I know you all are interested in a lot of detail on this, for me to provide to you a telephone number, which you might want to check with. It's not that I don't want to answer these questions. It's simply that I think that there are people who are in a much better position and are certainly a lot closer to the scene of the action to be able to answer the questions. And, excuse me, this is the headquarters of the U.S. Pacific Fleet located in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and their telephone number is area code 808-471-3769. Please don't all call at once. Does anybody else have anything?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.